Alright, it is now. There.
Going back into my family history, I don't know it really well as far as who else was in the service.
Hmm.
I know on my dad's side, my dad fought in World War II. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a doctor in World War One. On my mom's side, my grandparents, I don't know if my grandfather on my mother's side ever saw, ever was in the army at all. I just don't know. My uncle, my mother's brother, served in the Navy in World War II. I don't know if he saw any combat or not, but I know he served in the Navy. I had another uncle that was also in the Navy. And again, I don't know what happened to him, but apparently he had gone through some stuff that was a little on the traumatic side, and it affected him for the rest of his life. That he never talked about it particularly, but I got the impression a lot of it stemmed from some of the things he had gone through during his Navy days in World War II. My dad served in Europe. Fortunately, the combat he saw was very limited, and fortunately he came home just fine. The worst thing that happened to him was he caught pneumonia and jaundice, which is treatable with antibiotics, and eventually came home and continued to recover. He had, I guess, was pretty sick for a year or so, and but he served in Europe, and then I served in Vietnam. I was drafted. I didn't join, and when you're drafted, you're normally drafted at the time. It was for a 2-year enlistment, 2 years, and usually it takes roughly a year to get through basic training and AIT, which is Advanced Infantry Training, and then you're deployed wherever you go. So I had been in the Army almost a year before I was even sent to Vietnam.
Right.
I was finally sent to Vietnam. I ended up in the 1st Cavalry Division in the I Corps area of Vietnam. My first entry into the country was at Cam Ranh Bay, which, if you know anything about Vietnam, was one of the largest Allied incoming bases. They handled all military ships and aircraft coming in, and a lot of private stuff too. But Cam Ranh Bay was huge. There were several thousand people there, military. And from there, I spent probably a week or 10 days there. And it was kind of a time of climatization, to get the new recruits coming in used to the temperature and the tropical climate. Mostly it was a boring time. There were a few rocket attacks, but all the lights were always off, so you never knew where at night. It never happened during the day. Then I was sent to An Khê, which was the 1st Cavalry Division's division headquarters, and that was out in the boonies. We flew into the local base and loaded up in a bunch of trucks, and then in about a hour's drive from wherever we flew into, they drove us into Ankei, and that was a major fire base. They had tanks and armor and some airborne troops. There were some troops from the 1st Division, 1st Infantry Division, Big Red One. And we spent some time patrolling the interior of the wire, the perimeter around, and just to get us used to what the jungle was and what it looked like and what it felt like to fight your way through the brush and vines and leaves and all that stuff. And then we did some exercises at night, and that's always fun when you can't see anything. And we were on patrol, and they had issued us our rifles early on when we had gotten to Ankei, and ammunition, and we stood the chance of meeting the enemy at any moment.
Right.
We had to be very careful, and so we worked a lot on how to move through the jungle silently without making any noise, and that's not such an easy thing to do.
No.
And then the last 2 or 3 days we were there, they sent us outside the wire into Charlie territory, VC territory, or the Viet Cong. And everybody was scared to death, but this close to a major fire base, looking back on it, was not that big a deal.
Right.
And we never made contact, but it was an opportunity to find out what it was like to pull guard duty
Yeah.
outside the wire, all on your own, and dig in on it with a foxhole and know what it sounded like at night, and what to listen for and what to look for. And again, nothing happened, but it was very exciting and kind of scary. At the time, the Marines were fighting a very hard-put battle in Khe Sanh. Khe Sanh was a Marine fire base right up at the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. And the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, had managed to close in very close to Marine lines and dig in. Now, how that happened or why that happened, I'll never know. It was never explained to me why the Marines let the NVA dig in just outside their lines. That's too close. You want to engage the enemy out and away,
Yeah.
miles away. So most of our moving was done with on helicopters. And every morning we were stationed on a hilltop, one of several, and from where we were located on our little hilltop, you can look right down into the valley, and there was Khe Sanh. And you could watch the planes come in and land and drop their cargoes, and without stopping, turn around on the runway and take off again. Sometimes they didn't even turn around. They just dropped their cargo and pulled up and kept going. Because the NVA, morning, noon, and night, were constantly mortaring, dropping in mortars on the Marines. And again, why the Marines let them get that close, I'll never know. But it was about the time that the military, whoever, decided they were going to drive the NVA out and they were going to free the Marines at Quai Son. And the reason I was there, and I was with the Delta Company, infantry company, every morning we would walk down our little hill and we would do a search and destroy mission. We'd spend the day beating the bush, just walking along trails, looking for NVA or bunkers or tripwires or trying to make contact with the enemy. And we began to do so. And little by little, the work we were doing, the Army, as opposed to the Marines on the base, the work we were doing began to relax the pressure on the Marines, and within several weeks, one of our sister battalions liberated the Marines, went in and opened the roads and relieved the Marines at Quai Son. And I always thought it was kind of funny that the 1st Cavalry Division had saved the Marines, not vice versa. So that was my introduction to Vietnam. All very scary at the time, but very exciting. First time being under fire and feeling what it was really like to take fire and not know who the hell was shooting at you. As the jungle was so tight and so thick that you'd see leaves move sometimes, but you didn't know where the bad guys were. So what else?
Let's see. Pugilistic combat, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Knock the snot out of somebody.
In basic training and in advanced infantry training too, they want you to have some experience using a bayonet. And when I did my basic training, the standard issue rifle at the time was an M14. And during my advanced infantry training, they hadn't changed weapons over, so we were issued M14s again, not M16s, but M14s. So the bayonet training I had was with a big, heavy 9-pound M14, and I liked it. I got a kick out of being able to use a big, heavy rifle in an M14, and knowing that the Vietnamese were little people. Here I was at almost 200 pounds. I knew they wouldn't put up much of a fight one-on-one.
No.
So anyway, I did pretty well at pugil stick fighting, and I had one of the things they would do was they would take your squad and line you up on a hill, and you'd have one man at the top, and then the rest of your squad would be lined up to the bottom, then they'd take another squad, and they would run up the hill,
Hmm.
and the first guy in the other squad would have to fight the first guy at the bottom, and then he'd go to the second guy and fight their way up, and each fight probably just lasted 10 seconds maybe,
Yeah.
15, 20 seconds. But nobody ever knocked me down or did any major wounds on me as far as the
Yeah.
stick fighting. And my our drill sergeant at the time, whether he was being helpful or hurtful, he took me on.
Hmm.
And at first I was really kind of afraid, but because this guy had been to Vietnam on 2 or 3 tours, and I thought he knew what he was doing. The better I got to know him, this is in AIT, Advanced Infantry Training, the more I learned that he wasn't all that great. So at this time it was a one-on-one situation, and everybody gets in a circle,
Yeah.
and 2 people are chosen to fight. And I had been chosen to fight 3 or 4 guys, one at a time, and then eventually they put in all 3 or 4 at once, and eventually you're going to go down under that.
Yeah.
But so the drill sergeant, after that ordeal, he grabs a pugil stick and he says, "Okay, Seiberts, let's see what you got." And I was tired by then.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'd been fighting for over an hour, and he came at me, and I said, I gotta think my way through this. I'm not gonna, brute force it.
Right.
So I sidestepped him a couple of times and parried his thrusts. You go for the guy's throat,
Yeah.
and it was easy enough to parry. He did that 2 or 3 times, and the next time he came in, I went to the other side, and instead of parrying a thrust, I gave him an uppercut with the butt of my rifle. And they were pugil sticks, not rifles. And it caught him in the groin. And his fighting days were over for that afternoon. Anyway,
Nice.
but it made me feel good that I wasn't humiliated out there in front of all the guys in the company.
Right.
And after it was over, like, "Did you see that? Did you see what Seiberts did?" Anyway, that was basically all it was. After we had been in country for several months, there would be times when our company's primary job was to search and destroy. So we spent most of our time being airlifted out to an area that they wanted swept, looked at. And we would disembark the helicopters, jump out, and spend the day sweeping the jungle in that area. And then when the day was over, if we didn't set up camp and spend the night there, we would meet back up at a landing zone, and they would pick everybody up and take us back to the fire base. Well, we were stationed at a fire base at the time, and I believe it was LZ Jane, Landing Zone Jane, and it was up in the northern part of Vietnam, but we were no longer near the DMZ. And the battalion had been there long enough that when you dig in, as long as you're there, you're always improving your fighting position. And which means you go from a little foxhole to linking your foxhole with a trench, or expanding your foxhole from 2 men to 4 or 5, or maybe 6, maybe turning your foxhole into a bunker, and sandbagging around your foxhole, and putting metal reinforcing rods in the roof, and then putting, I don't remember what they called them. Throughout the military, they're made out of steel, and they interlock, so that they act like hinges, and you can build roads out of them, you can build bridges with them, you can make runways out of them. It's very handy stuff. I don't remember what it's called. And on ours, we had put steel reinforcing over the roof of our soon-to-be bunker, and then these planks, and then on top of the planks, we stacked sandbags until eventually we had like 4 or 5 feet of sandbags on top of our bunker. Enough so you didn't have to worry about taking a direct hit from a mortar round. It would stop a mortar round, and wouldn't withstand artillery. But usually the NVA or the VC never had artillery. We were the only ones that had artillery. So inside the little bunker, you would use ammunition crates to have shelves and maybe a desk, and usually you had a cot for a bed. And if you had enough ammunition crates, and we did over time, because they just throw them away or burn them, you can make a nice wall with shelves in it. And some guys are very clean, and they are good about their personal hygiene. And if they bring C rations inside the bunker, they always throw the trash out and burn it. But a lot of them don't. So over time, a lot of the bunkers become full of half-eaten, rotten C rations that have just been thrown in the corner. And of course that brings in the rats. And it wasn't uncommon at night, you'd be asleep and you'd hear something run across the wall, or run across the floor, or rummaging in a corner where there was food. Well, I had it looked like a bookcase. There weren't any books, but that ran right up to my cot, and then continued on, down the wall. There were I think 3 of us in this one position, and I had heard, it sounded like a rat jump up on top of the wall. And you could hear him kind of working his way down the wall. And then he started to run. And it was like he's going to jump over me to get to the other wall. And he jumped. I could hear him. It was just rattle, 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 and then And I kind of waited for a second, and he didn't land on the other side. He landed on my chest.
Mm.
And it was like, oh, son of a gun. And here he is, sitting right here on my chest.
Yeah.
I can't see.
Right.
It's pitch black in there. But he's just right there. So I jumped, and he was as scared as I was.
Right.
And so he turns around and runs down the length of me, down to the foot of my cot, and jumps off on the floor and
Yeah.
disappears into the darkness. But it was funny to. It knocked the wind out of me.
Oh, I'm
I
sure.
mean, he was a big, heavy, fat, very well fed
I'm sure.
bunker rat, you know.
Yeah.
So just one of the strange things that happens to you in
The army.
the, yeah. No, it's
What's it called?
oh, what is that?
I don't remember.
Agent Orange.
That's what I got the orange
Agent
part,
Orange.
right?
Yeah. Napalm is a wonderful magical substance.
Mm.
It's basically gasoline that has been gelled.
Mm.
And when you see it out in the field, it's usually because an incendiary bomb has come in with napalm. An incendiary bomb, most of the ones I saw were about the size of this table. Maybe 1,000 pounds, 500 pounds, something like that. And they usually came in groups of 3. Not always, but usually there'd be 3 bombs dropped at the same time. And if you were close enough, you could see them tumble out of the bottom of the airplane.
Yeah.
And they just didn't come in like a bomb or a missile, but they tumbled end over end. And you could watch them fall and fall and fall and then hit, and it would just be this boom. So all this, a wave of flame erupt. And if there were 3 of them, depending on how close you were, sometimes you could even feel the heat off them. And they were used very effectively to, if not clear out, at least move the VC or the NVA deeper into their trenches, deeper into their bunker system. And it would give you guys, us, if we were going to sweep the area, it would give us a better advantage for being able to get down into their tunnels.
Right, because they
They
had
had
like
been
a whole tunnel system.
Push back, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and they hated it. There was one incident which it was nice to be in the cav. One of the things I really admired and felt very comfortable with being in the 1st Cavalry Division, we always operated under an artillery umbrella. We were always within range of friendly artillery.
Yeah.
And a lot of units didn't. They would have to find a company or a battalion or somebody that had artillery and ask them for fire support. We never had any trouble. We had our own FO, our forward observer, attached to our company, and if he wanted a barrage of artillery, all he had to do was call in on the radio. So one morning we were moving through an area, and we were moving kind of along the ridge line of some low hills, or small little mountains. And below us in the valley, there was a little stream, and you could see it every once in a while. And then there were clearings where that area had been bombed. Well, we were obviously slowly working our way down into this little valley, and we got to a point where we had to cross from one side of the stream to another, and it was very thick jungle. And I remember saying to a friend that I don't think that looks like a place I want to go visit. Um, it looks like a wonderful place for an ambush. And the company, and we're all spread out in line, the company had come to a halt, and word came down the line that everybody take a break, we're going to prep the area. So somebody else, our commanding officer and our FO decided it would be a good idea to prep that area too, just in case somebody might be down there.
Yeah.
So it took about 10 minutes to call up a flight of jets, and they were loaded with fragmentary bombs and napalm. And one came in with bombs and dropped a load of bombs and just blasted the daylights out of this one area. And then two of the jets carrying napalm dropped them right on the money. And it was just two big waves of orangish yellow liquid fire that just engulfed this whole area where the little creek was. And we waited about an hour after that because it was pretty hot. And then we got up and moved out into that area. And as we swept it out, or began to go through that area, we found some bodies. We didn't know if they had been there all along, or if they just happened to be there. I mean, they could have been dead bodies from, weeks before. There was no way to know. But there were VC, NVA bodies there. We referred to them as crispy critters. And they had to be there. I mean, they couldn't have been there very long because the smell of burning flesh was very strong. And but it was nice. We had the comfort of saying, all right, send a platoon down there and sweep the area to probe it. We didn't waste manpower to do that. They did it with artillery. Once the napalm hits and the canister breaks open, this jelly-like material comes bursting out and it's ignited. Well, there'll be a lot of times when not all the napalm gets burned, and you'll find chunks of napalm stuck to trees or in cracks and crevices in the ground or holes or anyway. But it was just kind of an orangish jelly-like substance. But it was an amazing type of weapon to use against somebody. I was always glad that I wasn't on the receiving end of that. Agent Orange, on the other hand, was a spray. And in some areas where the NVA or the VC were operating, we couldn't, it was too difficult to tell as far as our helicopter or aerial reconnaissance because of the thickness of the jungle. So somebody had come up with the idea of, well, let's use a herbicide and spray the jungle, kill off all the foliage, have the foliage, drop their leaves, and in 3, 4, 6, 8 months, you can see the ground. So you can kind of keep track of anybody moving through that area because there wasn't any foliage anymore. And there would be huge areas. It might be, usually everything was measured by clicks, kilometers. There would be a dozen clicks that would be treated with Agent Orange. And God only knows what that stuff was. But a lot of people were exposed to it because they would spray it one day, and then maybe in 2 or 3 days you would send a company of infantry through that.
Right.
And you're going to be breathing, if it's clinging to the leaves and stuff,
Right.
you're going to be breathing that stuff, getting it on your clothes, getting it on your skin. So a lot of guys in a few years begin to complain about eye problems, breathing problems, skin problems, lung cancer problems, cancer of the stomach or the bowels, and the culprit was Agent Orange. And there was enough of a public outcry, and this took a decade or two, but there was enough of a public outcry to get the military to get some serious investigation stuff going, and the government began to compensate any of the GIs that were having problems that could be related to Agent Orange. Very unpleasant stuff.
Right.
And there was a time when we were exposed to, I believe, probably, was an insecticide. There was a time or two we were operating in central, western Vietnam in some plantations. And the plantations were beautiful. They were either French or Dutch, I don't remember, but they were rubber plantations. And in nice, long, neat rows, they had rubber trees growing.
Yeah.
And we loved it because there was a lot of good shade. It was nicely ordered. Like a lot of the guys had hammocks. They'd
Yeah.
sleep outside in the hammocks between the... and it was fun to carve your initials in a rubber tree and watch the milky white latex sap ooze out of but it was such a nice area. A lot of times at night they would set up a huge screen, like on a
Yeah.
bed sheet,
Uh-huh.
and it could be a John Wayne movie or cartoons, anything.
Yeah.
Anything to break the monotony. And there were 2 or 3 nights sitting there, and again, you're sitting on ammunition crates, and you'd hear the helicopters come over, and they were low,
Yeah.
and they would whoop, 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 whoop over you, and then 30 seconds later or a minute later, there would be something falling down, landing on your skin. And I always assumed it was for mosquito control, vector control, not Agent Orange. I don't know that, but it was always one of those things that
Yeah.
I hope this, because you were sitting there, wasn't anything you could do, you gotta breathe.
Yeah.
And it was just in the air all around us. And hundreds of us, there was 2 or 3 companies involved,
Yeah.
were being exposed to whatever the stuff that was being sprayed by the helicopters was. But the areas that were affected by Agent Orange, when you got up in a helicopter, and if you're at 5,000 feet or 6,000 feet, you really have a terrific view of everything underneath you. and you see these huge brown areas of jungle stretching off, you know, to the horizon or to the foothills or something, where they had sprayed Agent Orange, and it was just as dead and brown as it could be. It was a sobering view from a helicopter. Like, wow, that's a lot of dead foliage. You know?
Yeah. I know Rich, when he came home, he had issues with people. When he came home, did you I think you told us that you didn't really run into any major issues when you came home from the public.
Of people putting you down or bad mouthing you. Or
Yeah. Either that or it was because Rich had the super sport and people were jealous.
No, I felt very fortunate. Your grandmother, Norma, my wife, was very active in a local church.
Mhm.
And one of the nice things about having a church supporting you, these were people I'd never seen before, never met. She began attending this church after I had, after I was in the Army. But these complete strangers would send you boxes of cookies, care packages.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'd send you wool socks.
Hmm.
Yeah, always wanted wool socks because your feet were always wet.
Yeah.
Even if it was dry in summertime, you were sweating and your feet would be wet. In the monsoon, the jungle was always wet, it was always raining, and your feet would be wet. But a good pair of wool socks was wonderful. And a lot of the people in the church would send you 2 or 3 pair of wool socks, a couple of dozen cookies, home baked cookies. I mean, it was wonderful. And I always appreciated the people at the church where your grandma was attending were very good about supporting me. It'd send you letters, cards. You know, understand it's your birthday. You know, happy birthday. Hope everything's fine. We're praying for you. Things like that. And it was at Christmas you get a ton of Christmas cards from people you'd never seen,
Right.
and maybe a family picture. Like, who are these people? Like, oh, yeah, okay. And it was always terrific to get that kind of support. So when I came home, I of course began attending church with my wife,
Yeah.
and these people treated me like I was, one of their own, and there was never any criticism on their part, and that kind of became our social family.
Yeah.
So I never experienced any real negative stuff about being a soldier, or hurting anybody, or killing babies or anything like that.
Because I know that at First Church, I know that somebody called out Ray. I forgot his last name. It was Anthony's dad, Ray. Somebody had called him out
Yeah.
about that, and I was always curious about that.
Negatively?
Yeah, I forgot the exact context. Somebody said something that upset him, or
I don't remember that.
it was a number of years. It was at least 10 years ago, so a little bit foggy, but
He was over there about the same time I was,
right.
and if something like that had happened in the congregation, and I had been there, I would have probably had a little talk with the person that that had been so negative
Yeah.
after church, because it's. But I don't remember anything like that happening.
I know that one time Rich was, because once he got back, he was making love, and then my mom appeared, and he was taking a class, and the class was something about Vietnam, and Rich knew the professor and what the professor wanted, so he was talking about Vietnam and how bad it was and other things. But anyways, that's yeah. I don't remember everything about Rich. I do know that he was a mechanic for a long time, and then he fell out of a truck and broke his leg. And after after going to Japan and getting some medical attention, he was better. But by that time, he was like, you know what? I think I'm done here. So he was came home. So I'm glad he did.
But he stayed in the reserves.
Yeah, he stayed in the reserves for a really long time, and one of his friends and him pulled a prank on somebody. I forgot exactly what the prank was, but they did that. And one of the other things was the commander didn't want to see any coolers of any kind. So what they did was they took one and spray painted it, camouflaged, and that's where they'd store their sodas and other things. And it's one of those things where my dad is like, it's just a cooler, you know, whatever. But for me, it's like, you know, even though the cooler is broken on the inside and it leaks and stuff, which that's an easy repair, you know, it's just kind of a neat little piece to hold on to. But anyways,
The guys were very comfortable with the military setting, especially if you had joined. There was two distinct differences in soldiers in Vietnam. There were your RAs, which were regular Army, and your draftees. I was a draftee, and the RAs usually were a little more hardcore, a little more spit and polish. A lot of them had been on 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam, where your draftees, they would put in their 12 months and get out.
yeah.
And after everything I had seen in the military, wasn't something that I wanted to continue. I was married at the time, so I had a wife to come home to,
Yeah.
and kind of an extended family by then too. If I had not been married, I was thinking very seriously about switching my MOS, and I don't remember what the MOS was, but instead of infantry, it wouldn't have been difficult if you took a couple of tests and passed the tests okay. You could become a warrant officer in the helicopter area. And a warrant officer was kind of like a crew chief on Hueys.
Yeah.
They had a crew of 5. It was a pilot and a co-pilot and 2 door gunners and a crew chief. And the crew chief was responsible for the maintenance of the helicopter, to make sure it had been loaded properly, that there was enough ammunition, enough fuel. If you were loading supplies, that the supplies, you didn't take on too much. That if you were taking on people, you didn't take on too many people. But anyway, a warrant officer was a pretty important position. And the pay was pretty good. And if you had 2 or 3 years, 4 years of experience in the Army with helicopters, when you came back to the real world, there was usually a lot of places you could go to work, as people were looking for those kind of skills. But I was very tempted for a month or two about taking the tests and seeing if I could get into warrant officer school, and but it would mean I'd have to re-up for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And finally I decided, nope, I'm going home. Don't want to do that.
So, after coming home, what'd you do as a career? I know you had a many a career, I think, or doing a many of different things after you came home.
Yeah. I was looking for work at the time, and I had a friend that I'd gone to school with when I'd been a full-time student before I got married.
Yeah.
And Jerry, my friend, got me a job where he was working with a local businessman in San Jose, and I did a little of everything. The company he had made signs, and at the time, before the computers changed the business, all signs, not all signs, but most signs were painted by hand.
Right.
And if you drive down the street today and you look at billboards, those were all hand painted, or they were signs that were made from paper that it took a professional to be able to put the paper up
Yeah.
and make it look proper on a billboard. Well, that's what this guy did. Most of his signs were all hand painted. So he needed someone to get leases for his signs. Now, say he had a customer that wanted, one of the big things at the time was highway directional signs. So if you're a young married couple and you're driving down the street with your bride, and you want to go look at new homes, you'd see a sign alongside the road, and it would say, "Just ahead, Winnemucca Housing Development. Come in and visit. Turn left at the next exit," or something like that. Well, we could put those in people's yards, and we would pay people to lease the sign space, and they needed somebody to go out and talk to the landowner. Because at the time in San Jose, there were thousands of acres of fruit orchards, lots of prunes, lots of apricots, lots of peaches. Anyway, the fruit canning industry was really big in San Jose 50 or 60 years ago. So if you went up to one of these property owners and they'd say, "Oh yeah, you're going to pay me that much money to put a sign up on my property?" "Sure, no problem." And you get a lease and you'd sign up the lease, and then you had to keep track of who was on the sign.
Yeah.
And could you rent out the backside of the sign too? So that's kind of what my job was. I started keeping track of the lease locations and the signs, and the copy was on the signs, and that kind of deal. So, and you had to have a permit
Right.
from the state, and you had to have a permit from the county, and if the property was in city jurisdiction, you needed a permit from the city. So I did the permit work for the cities too. And
Yeah.
sometimes there would be public hearings. The environmental concern was just getting started about that
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And there would be people, we don't want any dirty signs on our highways. This visual pollution, we don't want those. So you'd have to go to city council meetings or county board of supervisor meetings when there was a hearing on signs. So that was one of the jobs I had. Eventually, I got a job with a company that sold safety equipment. Safety goggles and glasses,
Yeah.
breathing apparatus, not just a little dust mask, but the particle masks,
Yeah.
self-contained breathing apparatus that you see the firemen use.
Right.
That was a fun job. And eventually I went from a little local company to a national company that sold EAR earplugs,
Yeah.
and worked for them. And then eventually I got a job as a teacher and
Yeah.
teaching, and that's what I did. Spent the rest of my life doing the next 20 years or whatever it was.
Cool. So I heard from my dad that you were a little bit on the older side when you joined. Is it true that people called you Grandpa?
No,
Oh, darn.
some of them called me Pops,
Oh.
and they would say, Cypress is the older dude over there, the old guy over there. I took some ribbing about it, but no, nobody ever called me Grandpa.
Oh. So,
I wasn't that much older. I was older than some of our officers. Well, several officers that I served under, that I was a couple of years older than they were. That they were right out of OTS, Officer Training School, and I was as well educated as they were. I'd been to college. There was no big deals, you know. But no, they never called me Grandpa.
so is there like, I think you probably have answered this question before, but is there like a movie of, I've heard a lot of people talk about movies, and when it comes to war, is there any movie that was even close to the general feel or kind of what you went through? I heard that Full Metal Jacket, and what was the other one? That there was a scene in Forrest Gump, and why can't I remember that other movie that I can't remember what it was called. George Lucas said no to it. I don't remember the name of the movie. What was it called? The Critical Drinker made a video about it. I don't remember the movie. Oh, what was it called? I feel dumb.
About Vietnam that, to me, was accurate as far as leaving you with the feeling of what war in Vietnam was like. I just watched part of Full Metal Jacket just recently, the other night, and I didn't like that movie very much because all the guys in it, the main characters in it, were so dysfunctional. The guys in my company, the guys in my platoon, were a tight-knit group. They were trustworthy. They were honest. They didn't take drugs. I mean, they might smoke some pot once in a while, and they might get blitzed on beer, but they weren't potheads. They weren't drugged up every night. They didn't take drugs in the field. and there were some movies that came out around the time of Full Metal Jacket that portrayed the guys doing that. I got not in our company.
Apocalypse Now, that was the movie.
Oh, there's a scene in there. And I'd have to see the movie again to know where it was. But there was a place where they're on a beach, and there's this horrendous gunfight going on, and they had come in on a hot LZ, and they were the helicopter was landing, so they're landing like right in the middle of a lot of I don't know if they're VC or NVA, and there is a scene where some Vietnamese guy grabs a satchel charge and runs over to a helicopter and throws the satchel charge in the helicopter just as it starts to take off. And so the helicopter is taking off, and you figure, are they going to kick that thing out of there? Or what? Well, as the helicopter picked up, it kind of swung around, and a helicopter can maneuver surprisingly well on a takeoff or a landing. And that scene, as the helicopter lifts off, and you're in the helicopter and you're looking down at the ground, looking at these people down there, looking up at you, and the way the background was, turning and twisting and everything, that was the most realistic for about 30 seconds or maybe a minute. That scene was like, my gosh, I felt like I was there. That's just exactly the way it was. But as far as the story, the BS about drugs, killing each other, that didn't happen. That wasn't anything.
And since today, the 25th of May, is I'm bad at math. The 47th anniversary of the original Star Wars movie. My dad's always told the story how he watched it. That you came home from watching the movie, you picked him up, and then took him to the theater and watched it.
Oh. Same day?
Yeah. Is that kind of how it went down? For the most part?
To be honest with you, I don't remember. It could very well have happened. I remember the first time I saw it with a friend that had been one of my friends at church. And I wanted to see it. Everybody was talking about it. It was on the news, and have you seen Star Wars? It's really cool. And the character Darth Vader, and what a dark, grim person he was, and the Force. May the Force be with you, and the using the Force for the dark side. How is that portrayed in the movie? Before I let my little 8-year-old kid see something like that, I wanted to see, can he handle it, or is this, not so good? So I went to see it with a friend from church, because he had the same ideas. And we thought a lot alike. It was Dennis Sullivan. God, what a neat guy he was. So we went and saw it together. And he loved it, and I loved it. I thought it was just absolutely just terrific. So I know it was within a day or two. If I didn't pick up Mike and say, hey, we're going to go to this movie, and just right away, if it wasn't that day, certainly it was within a day or two. Because I wanted to see it again, and I knew he'd love it. So.
Yeah, definitely a masterpiece of a movie. It's held up, especially the original theatrical edition is definitely held up. And you could argue that some of there are some sequences that could have been a little bit better, but yeah, I think the original theatrical version is just perfect.
So how many years?
40th
40th anniversary?
The 47
Almost
years.
50 years.
Almost.
For a movie that's that old to stand up that well,
Oh yeah.
it's a magnificent production.
Oh yeah, because not too many films have lasted that long.
Very few. Just a handful.
The only other films that really come to mind, King Kong, the original, which, man, that is such a good movie. Let's see, Wizard of Oz, which came out, I want to say like 5 years after King Kong or something like that.
I'm not sure.
Which is really weird to think about. Yeah, I think it came, I know it was in the 30s. It was not
Yeah, I
before.
think 1936 or
Something like that. Like
38 or something like that.
38, 39. It's a Wonderful Life. It's definitely stood the test of time. The original Godzilla, the original Jaws, it definitely stood the test of time. Although the shark still looks a little bit fake. And I've seen it. I've actually seen that shark, or not the exact one they used in the movie, but a replica of it that was made for Universal Studios Orlando or Universal Studios, and someone found it in a junkyard.
really.
Yeah.
Well,
And,
I
they restored
remember
it.
seeing it at Universal Studios Burbank not too long after it had been a movie,
Yeah.
but long enough that Universal Studios had incorporated in.
Yeah, the animatronic.
Yeah.
The,
So I don't know how, if that was, how close to the movie
probably about a year, or not even. Yeah, about probably a year after the movie
that
came out.
soon. But I remember looking in the wrong place to see the shark come up. 'Cause you're in that little tram thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was Melissa, maybe it was Grandma. It seems to be it was Melissa.
I think it was.
That she saw it come up out of the water.
Yeah.
And by the time I saw it, Melissa had climbed up from me, clear over to the other side,
Yeah.
and was like trying to climb up on my head. 'Cause, she thought it was real.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess fear of.
I was impressed with that.
Yeah. I guess fear of creatures underwater attacking boats is lasted a while, because I do not like the hippos on the Jungle Cruise.
Still.
Nah, it doesn't help that I also learned that the body of water that you're in during that section is like 8 feet deep. So
I didn't know it was that deep. I thought
yeah,
it was
I've seen some pictures of it
4
drained,
feet deep or something.
and it's really deep there. And to do repair, I actually have to send divers and to do all the repairs. And there's not enough money on this planet to put me in a life preserver next to those things.
Yeah.
I just something about animatronics and water. It's just there's actually a whole community on it on YouTube, and I made a video about it at the time, a little compilation of them.
Well, there's a scene, now that you mentioned it, there's a scene in, it seems to me it's, this Alien 1 or Alien 2, where they're in like a ventilating shaft,
Yeah.
and this alien comes up out of the water,
Yeah, it was the second one.
and it's dark,
Mm-hmm.
and the alien's all shiny,
Yeah.
and kind of glistening, but it's dark and it's hard to see.
And it just towers over that little girl.
Yeah, I guess it was with the little girl.
The second one, yeah.
Very, very spooky, and a movie like that doesn't usually bother me particularly. It's
Yeah.
oh, that's really cool. This was oh god, it was just awful.
Yeah.
That one scene with it coming up out of the water.
What was that? There was another movie that you had made mention of, Creature of the Black Lagoon, while it's underwater, and about to attack somebody that you bugged you or something?
Oh,
Oh,
overall, I was disappointed with Creature of the Black Lagoon. The underwater scenes of it
yeah.
swimming and how they showed some of those long scenes. It's not breathing, so it's not some guy in a scuba gear. I mean, here's the thing swimming along, and
Yeah.
you don't see bubbles coming out of him. How they did that, I don't know. I thought that was good cinematography.
A bunch of crazy people.
And
Somebody
they
who
could
can
use
hold
the
their breath.
rebreather or something. I don't know.
Some of them.
But no, for the most part, I thought Creature of the Black Lagoon was silly.
Yeah.
There was a lot of B-rated monster movies or horror movies
Tons.
in the late '50s and early 1960s when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And we went to all of them. We loved them, you know, but it was very few. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not. The Man from Planet X. When my mom took me to see The Thing, the original The Thing with James Arness, who played The Thing, that was playing with it. When they finally showed a picture of the man from Planet X, it wasn't uncommon when I was a kid to have double features.
Yeah.
You'd have two full-length movies running one right after the other. And Man from Planet X was the other. If you ever get a chance, it gives you a little. It's a softer version of science fiction. But there's a couple of scenes there. There's this alien spacecraft has crashed in England out on the moors. You know, the moors are kind of a swampy area.
Yeah.
And here's this spaceship kind of sitting there. And of course, the heroine, she has to go walk up to it. And it's got little lights flashing and look in the window. And you know that if she's going to look in the window, you're going to look right back at her. And sure enough,
I wonder if the guys who made the Mars Attacks cards ripped them off, because their Martian design looks, at least the costume he's wearing looks very similar to the Mars Attacks
yeah,
cards, which is it's interesting. The movie itself sucks, but the cards that came out were actually kind of neat. Tell a pretty cool story.
yeah,
And the reason I prefer the card set, because at the end of the card set, you know, the U.S. Army gets this over-the-top space gear and goes to Mars and blows up the aliens. You know, which I thought was a lot cooler than just YOLO music. But anyways, there was one last thing I wanted to make mention of, and I forgot what it was. Give me a second.